Feeling kind of out of it today, but I figured what the hell, just barrel on through, do a little reading thing. So, the juice is flowing. Spot soft. I was wondering if it's not so much more a fascination with collapse that we are experiencing. Yeah, I don't know if you're into like zombie films or post-apocalyptic films and stuff like that. It's kind of like a constant trope. Things like paintings like Hieronymus Bosch relate to this kind of a fascination with seeing the decay of society. I think a lot of intellectuals, and specifically French intellectuals, are big smokers. I think smoking really gives you powers of lucidity that are not attainable to the non-smoker, unfortunately. Yeah, I was watching like these little excerpts of like Deleuze lectures, which I really enjoy. So it has some weird nostalgia. I've seen like these black and white images from, I guess, the early 80s. But yeah, and he's smoking all the time. So it's a very short book, this Baudrillard book. I think you can read it in about 30 minutes or less, depending whether or not you're a speed reader. Maybe I should look into that, becoming a speed reader. Well, I'm very skeptical. I think that only works for like shit books. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying that. I've seen a couple of people saying like, oh, I learned how to speed read and I read a book a day. I think if anybody can read a book such as The Idiot in a day, there's a contender for a new holder of the title. Good books are, I think you're supposed to spend time with them, and even more so than that, I think it was, I'm going to be very pretentious here, I think it was Borges who said that it's not how many books you've read, but it's actually how many books you return to. I guess that's what I'm doing here, returning to a lot of books. And as I said, some of them I haven't read, and this is my very like little pretentious spread of books, but there's some of the ones that I was considering maybe delving into. Magic Mountain, I would really like to finish it, reading it for like over a year on and off, kind of embarrassing. So let's take a look at Jean Baudrillard. Why hasn't everything already disappeared? When I speak of time, it is not yet. When I speak of a place, it has disappeared. When I speak of man, he's already dead. When I speak of time, it already is no more. Let us speak then of the world from which human beings have disappeared. It's a question of disappearance, not exhaustion, extinction or extermination. The exhaustion of resources, the extinction of species, these are physical processes of natural phenomena. And that's the whole difference. The human species is doubtless the only one to have invented a specific mode of disappearance that has nothing to do with nature's law, perhaps even an art of disappearance. Let's begin with the disappearance of the real. We have talked enough about the murder of reality in the age of the media, virtual reality, and networks, without inquiring to any great degree when the real began to exist. If we look closely, we see that the real world begins in the modern age with the decision to transform the world, and to do so by means of science, analytical knowledge, and the implementation of technology. That is to say that it begins, in Hannah Arendt's words, with the invention of an Archimedean point outside the world on the basis of the invention of the telescope by Galileo, and the discovery of modern mathematical calculation, by which the natural world is definitively alienated. This is the moment when human beings, while setting about analyzing and transforming the world, take their leave of it, while at the same time lending it force of reality. We may say then that the real world begins paradoxically to disappear at the very same time as it begins to exist. By their exceptional faculty for knowledge, human beings, while giving meaning, value, and reality to the world, at the same time begin a process of dissolution. To analyze means literally to dissolve. But doubtless, we have to go back even further, as far as concepts and language, by representing things to ourselves, by naming them and conceptualizing them. Human beings call them into existence and at the same time hasten their doom, subtly detach them from their brute reality. For example, the class struggle exists from the moment Marx names it, but it no doubt exists in its greatest intensity only before being named. Afterwards, it merely declines. The moment a thing is named, the moment representation and concepts take hold of it, is the moment when it begins to lose its energy, with the risk that it will become a truth or impose itself as ideology. What the hell is that beeping? We may say the same of the unconscious and its discovery by Freud. It is when a thing is beginning to disappear that the concept appears. The owl, says Hegel, flies at dusk. God damn it, can you give me a break here? What the fuck? Take globalization. If there is so much talk of it as obvious fact, as indisputable reality, that is perhaps because it is already no longer at its height and we are already contending with something else. Thus, the real vanishes into the concept. But what is even more paradoxical is the exactly opposite movement by which concepts and ideas, but also fantasies, utopias, dreams, and desires vanish into their very fulfillment. When everything disappears by excess of reality, when thanks to the deployment of a limitless technology, both mental and material, human beings are capable of fulfilling their potentialities, and as a consequence disappear, giving way to an artificial world that expels them from it, to an integral performance that is, in a sense, the highest stage of materialism. The world is perfectly objective since there is no one left to see it. Having become purely operational, it no longer has need of our representation. Indeed, there no longer is any possible representation of it. For if what is proper to human beings is not to realize all their possibilities, it is of the essence of the technical object to exhaust its possibilities and even to go quite some way beyond them, staking out in that way the definitive demarcation line between technical objects and human beings, to the point of deploying an infinite operational potential against human beings and implying sooner or later their disappearance. By the very excess of its fulfillment, another world in which things no longer even need their opposites in order to exist, in which light no longer needs shade, the feminine no longer needs the masculine, or vice versa. Good no longer needs evil, and the world no longer needs us. It is here we see the mode of disappearance of the human, and naturally of everything related to it. Gunther Anders' outdatedness of human beings, the eclipse of values, etc. It is here we see that the mode of disappearance of the human is precisely the product of an internal logic, of a built-in obsolescence, of the human race's fulfillment of its most grandiose project, the Promethean project of mastering the universe, of acquiring exhaustive knowledge. We see, too, that this is which precipitates it towards its disappearance, much more quickly than animal species, by the acceleration it imparts to an evolution that no longer has anything natural about it. Doing so not out of some death drive or some involutive, regressive disposition toward undifferentiated forms, but from an impulse to go as far as possible in the expression of all its power, all its faculties, to the point even of dreaming of abolishing death. Now what is most surprising is that this amounts to the same thing. This extreme endeavor on the part of life, or of eros, if by that term one understands the deployment of all capacities, the deepening of knowledge, consciousness, and jouissance, arrives at the same outcome, the virtual disappearance of the human species, as though that destiny were programmed somewhere and we were merely the long-term executants of the program, which irresistibly brings to mind apoptosis, the process by which a cell is pre-programmed to die. All this may give the impression or illusion of a fatal strategy, of an evolution at the end of which we would have passed beyond that vanishing point Kennedy speaks of, where, without realizing it, the human race would have left reality and history behind, where any distinction between the true and the false would have disappeared. In which case, we in our bodies would be merely the phantom limb, the weak link, the infantile malady of a technological apparatus which dominates us remotely. All this remains confined still within an evolutionary perspective that sees everything in terms of a linear trajectory from origin to end, from cause to effect, from birth to death, from appearance to disappearance. But disappearance may be conceived differently, as a singular event and the object of a specific desire, the desire to no longer be there, which is not negative at all. Quite to the contrary, disappearance may be the desire to see what the world looks like in our absence, and to see, beyond the end, beyond the subject, beyond all meaning, beyond the horizon of disappearance, if there still is an occurrence of the world, an unprogrammed appearance of things, a domain of pure appearance, of the world as it is, which can emerge only from the disappearance of all the added values. There are here the first fruits of an art of disappearance, of another strategy, the dissolution of values, of the real, of ideologies, of ultimate ends. But there is simultaneously a game, the possibility of playing with all these things, the possibility of an art, though not in any way an art in the cultural and aesthetic sense, but something closer to a martial art. Art itself, in the modern period, exists only on the basis of its disappearance, not just the art of making the real disappear and supplanting it with another scene, but an art of abolishing itself in the course of its practice. It was by doing this that it constituted an event, and it was of decisive importance. I say was advisedly, for art today, though it has disappeared, doesn't know it has disappeared, and this is the worst of it, continues on its trajectory in a vegetative state.